Well, hello. I'd like to welcome you all to the second week of the WVU Comm MOOC. My name is David Westerman. I'll be your host and moderator for this week, entitled Love at First Like. This week we're going to discuss some of the issues surrounding interpersonal communication and relationships and social media. Today's part is kind of an intro into the week. I'm going to talk a little bit about me. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I expect this week and what I hope to have happen. And I'm going to go a little bit into the topic and kind of introduce a story that you may have heard of that I think does a good job of kind of setting up the things we're going to go on to talk about for the rest of the week. First off, here I am. This is a picture of me taken last year. I still pretty much look like this, except right now I have a lot more facial hair than this. Now, this is a picture of where I'm from. And where I was born and raised, Niagara Falls, New York. Now, I'm not Aquaman. I was not actually born, obviously, in the waterfall, but I was born in the city of Niagara Falls. And pretty much I like to get the chance to always show off pictures of what I consider to be the most beautiful place in the world, and that is Niagara Falls. And if you want to, take a few extra seconds to take a look at this picture before you go on to the next slide, I completely understand. Now, this is not actually a picture of me, obviously, although it'd probably be a whole lot cooler if it was. This is Sparty. This is the mascot for Michigan State University. Michigan State is where I went to for graduate school, and while I was there, my main focus was on communication and technology, and I've become really interested in interpersonal issues, relationships, communication, using technology, especially social media, which I think provides a very, very interesting place, an interesting platform to study many of these issues. Now, just a few more notes about me. Number one, I have been employed at West Virginia University since 2007, and I've enjoyed my time here very much. It's a good place to be, and we get to do fun and innovative things such as this MOOC. Now, second one, at least on this, hockey is my favorite sport. I was very excited when the NHL ended the lockout. My favorite team, being from Niagara Falls, the Buffalo Sabres. Now, the final one, and most importantly, I'm very excited for this week. I'm really looking forward to getting a little bit of a chance to talk about some of these issues with you, and I'm looking forward very much to hearing your thoughts on many of these things as well, because I think this is an area that recently especially has got a lot more attention in mainstream press. I'm not always sure it's covered in a way that I would consider to be accurate. And hopefully some of what we're going to do this week is talk about those things and come to some understanding about what's going on and why social media are so heavily utilized for interpersonal relationships. So this is what I'm hoping that we're going to do this week, or at least what I plan we're going to do this week. I want to introduce you all to a few main topics in interpersonal and social media, and I will emphasize the introduce part. We are going to barely scratch the surface on various issues, but I want to kind of at least introduce and give us a chance, to give us something to kind of have to be able to talk about, and that's my hope. What you'll have throughout the week are some PowerPoint files, such as this one, that will be used to introduce each of the main topics that I want to talk about. Then it's my hope that we move on to discuss each of these things. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the discussion and how we're going to do it, I hope. But that's really what I want. One of the things I want, I should say, to be central to this week is discussion. I'm hoping that we can have some good ones. I'm really looking forward to that part very much. And then the final thing, I will try to provide some direction, both through these files, but also through extra links and some things that will, on one hand, will be included within these files themselves, but also I hope to bring up in our discussion points as well. And that will be, providing you more direction, at least a little bit of more direction, in case that some of these topics you want to go in more depth. I can try to point you in the right direction on some places I think you might want to do that. And now, as I said, I'm hoping that the discussion that we have is a central part of this class for this week. But that means that I'm going to ask you guys to, of course, be a big part of that, because it's not much of a discussion if it's just me talking and everyone else listening. I want us to, discuss these things. Now, throughout the week, we're going to have 3 ways that we can discuss things. And way number 1 is through Twitter. Now, if you use Twitter, and if you follow Twitter, there are a couple ways that we can discuss things through Twitter. Number 1 is the use of the hashtag WVU-CommMOOC. You see it listed here on the slide. I will try to monitor throughout the week this hashtag and try to respond to as many things as I can. Now, during the week and even after the week, if you have questions or things that you want to talk about with me, you can feel free to send me a tweet directly. My handle is @DKWesterman. So throughout the week, I will monitor both of these. After the week, if you have something specifically for me, you probably want to send it to my Twitter handle itself. Now, if you don't use Twitter or just don't want to use it for discussion, the second way that we can discuss things throughout the week is through Facebook. Listed on the slide here is a website for our WVU-CommMOOC Facebook group. If you haven't already added yourself to it, you can go to this site and ask to be added to the group. The nice thing about this group is even after the MOOC is over, this will still be there. So if you ever want to go back and reference, or if we want to continue the discussion even after the MOOC is finished, we can do it there. Again, throughout the week, I will do my best to take a look at this and respond to things as best as I can. Now, if neither Twitter nor Facebook are your thing, as I said, we will have 3 ways for discussion throughout this week. The third way is the discussion board provided at the MOOC website itself. And as I've mentioned before, I will try my best to check each one throughout the week. And I will do my best to try to respond to things throughout the week. But while you're waiting for me to respond to things, I would suggest and ask that you feel free to discuss topics and questions amongst yourselves as well. These are all discussion formats. We all learn best when we have multiple perspectives to hear from, so I want people to feel free to jump in, and if you see someone ask a question, for example, and I haven't responded to it yet, don't wait. Feel free to go ahead and do it yourself, and I will then do my best to respond to all of it, to kind of provide hopefully at least some context in the discussions, and answer questions as necessary as well. But you guys, you shouldn't feel like you have to wait for me to respond to things. I would ask that you feel free to do so, like I said, amongst yourselves, and I will participate in that as well. And hopefully through all of that discussion, we will come to some more understanding about social media and interpersonal relationships. Now, so far, all of the discussion options I've talked about are all what we would call asynchronous. They're not meant to be done in real time. If you have a question, you can post it, and when you get a chance to check back, you check back, and I'll do the same, and we'll all kind of have this discussion this way. And it's one of the nice benefits of the internet, is it allows us to have these kinds of interactions. We will also have one synchronous discussion as part of this week's MOOC, and this will, as it says on the slide, take place on Saturday, February 16th from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And what will happen during these 2 hours, I will be monitoring Twitter, Facebook, and the MOOC board throughout all 2 hours, and I will be doing my best to respond as much as possible to all 3 channels. Now, depending on how many people we have as part of that discussion, I may be better able to respond than not, or at least more frequently, able to answer all questions and things. But just like I mentioned before, this will also be a time when you shouldn't feel the need to wait for only me to respond, but feel free to discuss amongst yourselves as well. And I'm looking forward to that day. We'll see how it goes. I think it's going to be really interesting, or at least has potential to be very interesting, because at that point in time, we will have talked about all of the specific issues that we want to talk about for the week, and I'm looking forward to seeing what kinds of things we all have to bring to the table then on that day, the 16th. So again, you don't have to participate in this, and you don't have to wait until this day to bring up questions and to discuss. But this will be 1 2-hour block. I will be monitoring in real time as much as I can all 3 of our discussion options. Now that we've talked a little bit about myself and kind of what I hope to have happen this week, I want to talk a little bit about our first topic. Briefly introduce this because, as I said at the start, this is a story that you may have heard of, and is one that I think does a good job of introducing a lot of the issues that we're going to move on to talk about for the rest of the week. Now, in order to begin talking about this topic, I'm first going to turn it over to my assistant. And here he is. This is my assistant for this part. His name is Monty Teo. You may have heard of him. But for those of you who maybe haven't heard of him or don't know that much about him, I'm going to talk a little bit about who he is. Now, Monty Teo, as you may have guessed by looking at this picture, is a linebacker, or was a linebacker for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish this past year. He was the runner-up for the Heisman Trophy, given to the person who's named the top collegiate player of the year. And his team, the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame, made the national championship game this year. Although they lost, they made it, and it was kind of seen as this rebirth and this return to glory for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and Monty Teo was a big part of this. Now, the fact that he was a football player for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish is not why he's of interest to us for this week. Instead, the reason he's of interest to us, at least in part, is because Monty Teo had a girlfriend, and it was revealed during the season that his girlfriend passed away of leukemia. And this was a story that got a lot of national attention. It was something that was seen as spurring Monty on to continue playing. And this was a picture of Monty's girlfriend. Now, one of the kind of interesting parts about this is that Monty hadn't really met his girlfriend face to face, and they carried on an online romance, and they had for a while. But it still was his girlfriend and someone who he had come to care pretty deeply about. And this is where the story really gets interesting, at least in terms of our purposes. After the season was finished, it started to come out that not only had Monty's girlfriend not died during the season, but she actually didn't exist, or at least not in the way that he thought she did. It turns out, and details are still coming out about this story all the time, so when you listen to this, there might even be more details to the story. But what was noted is, instead of the picture that you saw in the last slide being Monty's girlfriend, the person behind this hoax was actually the man that you see in this picture instead. So what happened here? Well, it seems that Monty Teo was the victim of a hoax, and something that's come to be known as catfishing. Now, this term was kind of created in a 2010 documentary called Catfish, and also a movie basically outlining a similar idea, and also more recently with an MTV show called Catfish as well. But it really kind of took off. This notion of catfishing has really taken off, at least in popular press and in mainstream society, with the Monty Teo story here. Now, this definition that you see comes from the site Urban Dictionary, and it suggests that a catfish is someone who pretends to be someone they are not online in order to create a false identity, and typically to pursue some sort of online romance deceptively. Now, this is a pretty clear-cut case, seemingly, at least based on the details that we have today of this happening. One person created a fake identity and even had pictures to back up that fake identity in order to seemingly pursue, I should say, an online romance with Monty Teo. Now, there's a lot of things going on in this story, and the next few weeks, or the next few parts of this over this week, we're going to go into more parts of this to kind of really get an understanding of what might be going on here. Now, as we move forward, and before you move on to the next parts, I want you to take a little bit of time and think about some questions that I think that this story of Monte Teo really brings up. Number one, I want you to think about how common you think this is. How frequently do you think people try to catfish other people? Second, I want you to think about how easy this might be. Do you think, for example, that this is something you could do to another person? Then I really want you to think about, how does a story like this play out? How is this able to happen? How can a person pretend to be someone else online in order to accomplish this goal of making them think that this is a relationship? And I want you to think about this, and I'm going to guess that some of the ways that you may think about this may not be all there is to it. And that's, of course, one of the reasons we're going to move on to talk about more of that as we move throughout the week. Now, all of this, I think, is really interesting because for the last question's purpose, or for trying to address the final question on this slide, because I think thinking about not just this story, but all of the things that underlie this story, and the things that we're going to move on to talk about for the rest of the week, can tell us a lot about quote-unquote online love, or really more about how we come to form relationships with other people using technology, which is going to be one of the main goals and one of the things I hope to talk about most throughout this week. Now, what you see on the slide here are some links that you can go to for more information about some of the things we talked about today. If you're interested in knowing more about kind of the Monte Teo case or story, whatever you want to call it, the first two links here will send you to articles with more detail. The first one especially is really interesting because the author of the article spoke to some communication researchers and scholars, people who study online relationships, and a couple of the names you will probably see again this week. So that's a really interesting one for that reason, I think, especially because they actually talked to a couple of the scholars who this is their area as well. Now, the third link there, if you want to know more about Catfish, the movie and or the television show, you can go to the Wikipedia page, and it will give you a little bit of information about that. And again, we'll kind of give you some more ideas around this whole topic of catfishing. Now, that's all we've got for this part. The next three parts for this week, we're going to move on to talk about different parts of this story and what they have to say, I think, for relationships online. Hopefully, this has got you thinking. That's my goal for all of these parts, and I'm looking forward to telling you some more in the second part.